I have a question that I'm trying to deal with. What am I supposed to do as a Christian? What am I supposed to do? I feel like I'm very familiar with what I'm supposed to not do, because that's the most common messages that I hear. Here's what you avoid. Here's what you stop doing, or repent from that. Leave that behind. Jesus has a lot to say about that too. Leave your life of sin. Leave this thing behind. Make this change. Stop that. I think I've got a pretty good idea of what I'm supposed to think about God as creator, Jesus as son. Jesus is my access to God. Jesus offers forgiveness. I feel like I've got a pretty good grasp of that, but sometimes I get a little bit lost in the weeds with the what am I supposed to do? Sometimes I get confused and think that what I'm supposed to do is figure out what to think. Sometimes I get confused and think that what I'm supposed to do is figure out what to not do. And then if I'm not doing the not do's, then I must be, by definition, doing the other thing. The do-dos. That was for you, Ron. Because if you don't do what you should do, you're left with what you do, and you don't want that. That's all for you, Ron. I get confused sometimes because it gets complex. It seems like in the world there's a lot of things that you might say are worth doing. A lot of things that we would say, well, that's a value, that's worth doing, that's good. But I want it simpler than that. And I think that the scripture does have a pretty simple answer, not surprisingly. What am I supposed to do? I think the scripture answers that question somewhat directly in Matthew 28, so you can turn there now. What am I, as a Christian, supposed to do? Excuse me. This little section that we're about to read, it's fairly short. It's toward the end of chapter 28. These are the last words of Jesus to his disciples in Matthew. And last words are interesting for us because they carry some special significance in most cases. When we memorialize people, we often remember them for their last words or share the last words that they shared with us. If somebody is going to be leaving for a while and then returning, we want that to be special and more significant. We spend more time thinking about the last thing that we're going to say to somebody in a conversation than we do like something in the middle of a conversation. We just have this impression that I think is correct, that when you're leaving a conversation or relationship, the last thing that you say is important and carries weight and significance. And I think that this particular instance is a lot like Saturday afternoon when mom is leaving for the grocery store and pokes her head back in and says, all right, kids, you have to clean your room before you can play Fortnite. Because the last thing that she says are the expectations for what the kids have to do while she's gone. She won't be here for them to ask. So she has to leave behind last words of instruction so that they will understand what to do. And that's what we're about to get from Jesus, because here in the end of Matthew, this is like Jesus, the end of things have wrapped up. He's resurrected. He's shared some things with them, had some short experiences, and now he's going to go. And he's going to give the last words, very much like mom poking her head back in and saying, no Fortnite till you clean your room or do your laundry or whatever the chore is. Jesus has some, here's what you need to do while I'm gone, to share with them. And I think it's a great answer to our question. So pick up with me in verse 18, chapter 28, verse 18. Then Jesus came to them and said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. These are fairly simple and straightforward instructions. These are the instructions that the disciples are left with in Jesus' absence. You are supposed to go and make disciples. How do I do that? Baptize them and teach them to obey everything that Jesus has commanded. That's kind of it. The whole thing. What am I supposed to do as a Christian? What am I supposed to do? Can you give me a broad strokes category that everything I do as a Christian should fit in? You are supposed to go and make disciples. All right. Easy peasy. Simple dimple. Plain Jane. Straightforward. Something that rhymes with straightforward. Right? Simple enough. This text is useful in its simplicity and also that it provides us with a definition. Because we've got make disciples of Christ. What does that mean? What does it mean to be a disciple of Christ? Right within the passage, we have some qualifiers that are given so that we can understand what Jesus means when he says that. If you want to know, am I a disciple of Christ? Have you been baptized? Do you obey Christ's teaching? Like, I wish there was some way I could make this more complex so that I could have more interesting things to say about it. It's just that this is the simple, straightforward one. If you want to be a disciple of Christ, that is what you do. You are baptized, and then you obey Christ's teaching. If you want to go out and make disciples, that is what you tell them to do. You tell them you are baptized as your sort of induction ceremony into your relationship with Christ, and henceforth you will be dedicating your life to obeying Christ's commandments. And the nice fun turn within the passage is it's self-referential, because as soon as you get to the point as a disciple that you are obeying Christ's commandments, one of the commandments that you then obey is the one to go and make more disciples. If we're obeying everything that Jesus has taught us to do, then one of the things Jesus has taught us to do is to perpetuate Jesus, to go and share Jesus with other people, go and make disciples, repeating the same process that we ourselves experienced. It's like, yeah, I get it. What am I supposed to do? I am supposed to go and make disciples. And we get even more context for this, where he sort of bookends those instructions with two, I'm going to call them cosmic realities, like two truths that they just are. Jesus tells us what they are, and then there's something that we do, right? The first one of those is all authority in heaven and earth has been given to Jesus. That's just something that is cosmically true. And so in response to that, we go out into the world and we tell everybody about that. Hey, Jesus is actually in charge of every single thing there is. He would like you to follow him. Okay? And then, like, as we're doing that, another just cosmically true thing that just exists about the world, when we are going and trying to do that work, verse 20, Jesus is with us always to the very end of the age. So it's just such a tight, logical instruction. Here's the truth. Jesus is in charge. So here's what you do. Go let people know that Jesus is in charge, because you now know the truth. They might not know the truth, so you need to give them an opportunity to respond. And Jesus says, you're not going to do it alone. I will be with you. This is the whole program. You will go and make disciples who are responding to the same truth you have responded to. And you perpetuate and perpetuate and perpetuate until everyone has the opportunity to make the choice. Do I want to follow the Lord of heaven and earth, or do I not? What am I supposed to do as a Christian? That. Make sure everybody is aware of what's going on. There is a God. This God has expectations for us. We should let other people know what those are, because they've been revealed to us, and we've decided to submit to them. And one of the expectations that's been laid on us is that we will go and tell people about those expectations. You track with this logic? Right? It's pretty simple and straightforward. I think that everything that we can come up with that's worth doing as a Christian falls under the category, go and make disciples of all nations. And we struggle when we get away from that. You know, we come up with other things that we feel like are worth doing, and then we get in like weird water and weird territory. I'm not going to give you any examples, because that's somewhat divisive, and that's not the goal at all. The goal is to keep it as simple as possible, right? What am I supposed to do as a Christian? The answer is go and make disciples of all nations. And this is really simple, straightforward, and easy, except that I've noticed something about it. All of our conversation, and when I say our, I mean people like me who stand up here on the stage and tell you, here's what I think about this stuff. People like me, all of our conversation about this is too theoretical. I stand up here and I go, so go. It's easy, right? That's the whole thing. Now, yep. Why aren't you doing it? Or something like, that's the mood, that's the feel. And that's what really struck me this time as I was going through the Great Commission, which is what this is called. Forgive me for delaying talking about that for so long. This gets referenced as the Great Commission. That's what we call it in Bible scholarship. This is what Jesus tells us we're supposed to go and do. And then somebody like me stands up here and is just like, yeah, so like, go do it, right? Like as though it's self-explanatory or something. And upon noticing that, I became really convicted because I know I have personally done this before to you. It's not like this is some out of time, out of body theoretical thing. I have stood up here and said, so like go share it with your friends. You like what we do at church, go tell them what we do at church. Like as though that's kind of an end to itself. And I'm convicted about that because I want to give you more to go on than that. Because I don't think that that's quite enough if I'm being honest with myself. So this is not like a shame you sermon because you guys aren't doing the right things. This is a shame Todd sermon because I haven't given you ideas about what to do. And I want to do better at that. And so I have some ideas about what to share this morning. I want to share those that are a little bit more practically bent. I want to share a way of thinking about it, and then I want to share some examples that I've experienced as I've tried to do it, and see if maybe you can relate to them, or I don't know, you can sort of sub in your own examples. But I want to share this way of thinking about it that I think is really practical, and then I want to show you how I practically implemented that, hopefully, practical way of thinking about it. Does that make sense? So I'm spending kind of little time with the text this morning because I think the text is just really good at defining itself. Instead, I want to try and get really practical on you and just see how this works, because I don't know if I've done this well in the past. So let me give you how I think that this works. This is the mental category that I've created for this, the training regiment, so to speak, your way of approaching, okay, neat, I want to tell someone about Jesus. What do I do? I think every time I have thought about bringing up Jesus to someone, I have had one of two experiences to varying degrees. The first experience I'm going to call curiosity, where I am curious about them or about a situation or about what's going on. The second experience that I think is the exact opposite of curiosity, I'm going to call insecurity, where I am concerned about me, what I'm going to look like, what's going to happen to me, or something of that nature. And I think these things are exact opposite forces. Because when I stand up here and I'm like, go share Jesus, right? Make disciples of all nations. That's the easy thing. What do I do as a Christian? Go make disciples. You immediately think to yourself things like, Christians have done this poorly in the past and we look like obnoxious jerks sometimes. I don't want to contribute to that negative stereotype, so I am going to be very careful and selective about when I share so that I don't look like an obnoxious jerk. It's a good impulse there. It is. I'm just going to submit to you that I don't think dispelling the obnoxious jerk Christian stereotype will be accomplished by not saying anything. I think it will be reversed or undone by creating positive experiences of sharing Jesus with people in a way that is not obnoxious or jerk-like. And so the kind of abstain until the perfect opportunity sort of thing, I don't know that actually works to undo the obnoxious jerk stereotype. Because, I'm not going to get distracted on that. I want to keep moving in with curiosity and insecurity. Sharing your faith with somebody, bringing up Jesus in a conversation is difficult for a lot of reasons. You are afraid of perpetuating the obnoxious jerk stereotype. You are afraid of having them react negatively to you and becoming angry or hostile towards you. That is a fear that you experience. I'm certain of it. You don't even have to tell me or raise your hands. I know that that's something you're worried about. You are also worried about inserting your nose in somebody else's business where it doesn't belong. I don't have any, this is not my business, right? They have their right to privacy, and I should not be prying or trying to force my way into the world. If they want to share with me, they can share with me. I'm not going to try and force my way in. I also think that is a fairly good impulse most of the time, and that it makes sense that these are things that you're concerned with, and that you're trying when you go forth and make disciples of all nations. You are trying to be careful, respectful, and considerate. I also think, though, that these things can paralyze us into not doing it at all. And so that's what I want to talk about this morning is this is my paradigm of curiosity and insecurity and how we can overcome these kind of forces that prevent us from wanting to share at all. Okay? And I want to take a brief aside to talk about the obnoxious thing and the hostility thing. I think that curiosity and insecurity can be best illustrated by your experience of starting a new job or starting a new school, right? The transitions from elementary school to junior high, the transition from college job to career job. When you show up to that job or that new school, you have no idea what's going to happen. I guess that's not totally fair. You have some general sense of what's going to happen. You don't know how it will play out for you the day of. When you walk into that experience, you don't know what's coming. You don't know what the people are going to be like that are going to have desks near you that you're going to work with or that are going to be passing you tools or whatever. You don't know what that will be like. You have two choices when you walk into a new job. You can walk in with a lot of curiosity and say, I don't know what's going on. I'm here to learn. Make me into a good employee. Or you can walk into that new job and say, I don't want to embarrass myself. I don't want to look stupid. I'm going to pretend to know absolutely everything until it's, absolutely necessary that I have to admit I don't know something. Or I will go find it in a manual later. Or I will never ask any questions because I don't want them to know that I don't know things. I need them to respect me or whatever. One of these is a good employee. One of these is a bad employee. Right? That insecure short-term solution of face saving, I don't want to look stupid, has a shelf life. Eventually it will come out that you don't know what you're talking about. Eventually you will get in a spot that you fail, and eventually that will terminate. Maybe even terminate your employment because you led them to believe you knew what you didn't know. And if you just been honest from the beginning and expressed some curiosity about learning the job, you could have saved yourself all that struggle. Right? Hopefully that's relatable to you. You've seen people who start at your job that choose one of those two paths. You get irritated with the insecure person who's doing a lot of face saving. You appreciate the curious person who respects the job enough to learn how to do it well. Okay, this is how I want to illustrate curiosity and insecurity when you are initiating a conversation with a person and you want to talk to them about Jesus. You don't know what you're getting into. You just don't. There's some similarities to other conversations you've had. You just have no idea what's going on. If you walk into every conversation about Jesus or about anything with that insecurity of, I don't want to look stupid, I don't want to be embarrassed, I don't want to be offensive, I don't want to make a mistake, you are setting yourself up to be a bad conversation partner. You are not going to find out information about the other person that you need to know in order to be a supportive, loving Christian witness. If you walk into that situation with outward-facing curiosity, and you forget all of the face-saving insecurity that's all focused on me, and you demonstrate curiosity and interest in this other person, you will learn on the job how to be a good Christian witness to them that day. And you have no idea what you're going to get into before you start, every time. Sometimes you show up to a new job and you are surrounded by awful people and you quit that job. There will be times that you will curiously approach a person about their relationship with Christ. They will respond to you with enormous hostility, and the only right thing for you to do is back off and escape their hostility. That's going to happen. Just like starting a new job, sometimes you just find a dud, and it's a terrible job, and you leave it as soon as possible. Okay? This is just the nature of communication, relationships, and life. So we have to acknowledge that possibility right off the rip, otherwise you're going to go out and you're going to feel like you were lied to. Like I gave you a perfect formula that's going to work every time. It's not. Sometimes you're going to have bad interactions still. But here's what I'm trying to suggest to you, that when you approach the situation with insecurity about me, and I'm worried about me, and I want to make sure I don't look stupid, you have already failed. Because you can't now be the person that they need. You can't find out enough about them to do this job well. Before I go any further with any of that, does that make sense? Can I get like some nods or some like, no? I can see you pretty well from up here, so, okay. General consensus seems pretty positive, all right? Let me give you some examples of how this works, and I want to talk about this. Okay, we'll start with this one. I worked at Glow Golf many years ago when I was in college. It was like off to its own side thing. It was contained within a building called Zap Zone that did laser tag. I worked in the Glow Golf side. I was a manager, so I worked a day shift. And day shifts during the winter, no one's there because all the kids are in school. And so I would often end up wandering around or doing all my administrative work. When that was done, I'd go over to the Zap Zone side, see how people were doing. Long story short, I walked over to the Zap Zone side one day, and I saw one of the Zap Zone employees that I didn't know especially well was sitting off in a corner because there was no one in Zap Zone either. It's daytime on like a Tuesday or something. He's sitting off in the corner. He's got his hands over his face, and he's like crouched down, sitting, looking sad or scared or something. I didn't know what it was. So I walked over to him and just said, "Are you okay?" He looked up, saw me, immediately stood up and said, "Yep, I'm fine." Okay? This is the moment. This is the moment right here. Yep, I'm fine. I now have a choice to make. Insecurity, I don't want to pry. I don't know what his deal is. I don't want to push. I don't want him to get mad at me. I don't want to be, right? I have that choice. Or curiosity. People who are fine don't sit like that. Is he really okay? In this instance, I happened to choose curiosity. And I said, "Do you want to talk about it?" Just like that. And he looked at me, started to cry, told me that his grandma was in the hospital, and told me that he just saw on the news that a train derailed and a bunch of people got really hurt. And we went for an hour-long conversation about how the world doesn't make sense. Bad things happen to good people. His grandma is the best person he's ever known, and she doesn't deserve what's happening to her, just like those people on the train. And he just spilled his guts about how much the world does not make sense. He does not know me. We are not friends. We've met each other a couple times. I knew his first name. I think we had putt-putt together one time or something. Mildly acquainted, but not like close. That one small choice of curiosity, it doesn't seem right. I pushed a little bit in as polite a way as I could think of. I don't know. Maybe there's probably a way we could have done that better, I'm sure. And he just spilled everything. So we got to a point toward the end of the conversation where he's just like, "I just can't make sense of this stuff," right? I'm doing a lot of the listening and just sort of absorbing because I'm curious. I'm like, "What's going on with you? Are you okay?" Asking a lot of questions like, "Well, how, what are some experiences you've had with your grandma?" Or like, what's she dealing with? What's she in the hospital for? That kind of stuff, right? We're just talking and talking and talking. And I'm just trying to find out what's going on because he's upset. I can tell. I looked right at him. I can tell you're upset. Okay, why? What's happening? And it starts to transition. Once I get some information about what he's upset about, my curiosity starts to transition to like, I wonder if there's some way I can help here. I wonder if there's something I can offer that might be of use. Not insecurity like, when can I end this? I've got to get back over to my side. There's nobody over there. It's Glow Golf at 3:00 in the afternoon or whatever, right? Like my insecurity was not internal, where I was like, I don't know if I'm in the right place. What if a manager comes by from Zap Zone side? Like those thoughts could have been what won the day, and I could be like, we should meet up after work, and totally miss this opportunity. I could have done that. But instead I just leaned into the curiosity the whole way and got toward the end of the conversation, and I was curious if I could help. And so I said, "Do you want to know how I make sense of this stuff?" And he was very curious. "Yes. Yeah, I absolutely do want to know how you make sense of this." And so I just straight up just shared the gospel with him. I was like, I think that God cares about our world, and all of this stuff that's broken, God is trying to fix. And not that it's fixed right now, but that God is trying to do things in response to all these things that are breaking. And that's why I placed my faith in Jesus. And we had this long conversation. That curiosity, like, I wonder if I can help. I wonder if he'd be interested in my story. I wonder why he's sitting there with his head in his hands. I wonder why he's so upset. Right? Like, putting it all out away from me and forgetting about me for a minute gave me opportunities to have a conversation with a person that could have just yelled at me and told me to leave him alone. That was possible. But I'm not worried about that in that moment when I'm choosing curiosity over insecurity. I'm not worried about getting yelled at. I'm not worried about him giving me a hard time or like being hostile, or I'm just so curious about what he's going through. I just want to know. Like, tell me. This is surprising social behavior that you're sitting in the corner crying while you're on your shift. Can you tell me what's going on? Right? Like, and that curiosity just sort of pulled me along a pretty obvious path through a conversation to get to the end where my curiosity manifested as, I wonder if I can help you, and then I shared the gospel with him. Like stories like that, I think often, like, you hear that and that sounds totally unreal. Like, I'm just a regular dude. Like, I play volleyball. I just got married. Like, this is not magic, I'm not like, I don't have special powers. It's sort of the opposite. I've shared stories with you guys over the years. Like my social anxiety was intense. I was the guy who literally hid in the bathroom at my own birthday parties. Like I get it. I know it's hard and it's weird, but like this is the thing that I found works, and I really believe in it. Like this external curious focus versus this internal insecurity. It's incredibly powerful. I've had so much success, even in all of my anxiousness and craziness of like, I don't want to look stupid. I don't want to be embarrassed. The more curious I become about the world and about people, the more that just totally disappears. Let me tell you another story. I'm going to try and keep this one a little bit shorter. That might be challenging. There are more curious, insecure decisions in this story, though. When you go to a volleyball tournament, somebody has snuck in alcohol. Just how it works. All right, you're at a school, you're in a gym, somebody's got alcohol somewhere. Their water bottle doesn't have water in it, okay? That happens. So that happened at a tournament this year. There was a group of people who they were all getting pretty hammered by the time it was done. Like they had snuck in a lot. And this one guy was being obnoxious, like over the top. It was way more than his average. And people were starting to notice, like really, like tell him to be quiet and stop being obnoxious jerk. So I'm sitting in the bleachers because I usually pull out a few rows of bleachers. I'm sitting kind of toward the front. This guy's kind of behind me. And I'm sitting near this girl that's kind of an acquaintance that I've sort of know. We've never played on the same teams together, but like we know who each other are, and we're starting to get to know each other on a first name basis, at that point. And she turns around and she lets him have it. And like, I was like, you go girl, like, yeah, all right. Like really let him have it. And he laughed at her intentionally, like that way that jerks do to try and get under your skin. Like he did that thing, that jerks do. He did it. And to her credit, she was just like, yeah, whatever. She made her attempt and then let it go. I have two choices now. That was awkward. I don't want to get involved in that. Oh my goodness. Whew. What if he laughs at me? Right, this angst. Or, like my other choice, I'm starting to get to know this person. That was maybe just a little out of character I don't know her super well. I don't know. That was noteworthy. Something happened there. I wonder what that was. So I slid down just a little bit, and I just said, "Are you all right?" And she just was like, yeah. It really bothers me. It really bothers me when people choose to drink at these tournaments, and we shared that because I'm like, I don't know how you'd ever play this game drunk. Like, it's hard enough without being drunk. It's a hard game, and it's a reflexes game. How do you do that? Anyway, so like we kind of commiserated about that, and I was like, yeah, like I get it. I know. I'm sorry. And I just kind of made this offhanded comment. I was like, yeah, I try to not let that stuff bother me because I really feel for the guy. And she's like, what? What does that mean? I was like, well, just choice. Do I tell her the truth and risk vulnerability and opening myself up to satisfy her curiosity? Or do I just lock down in insecurity and just go, just dismiss, blah, 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 whatever. I chose to be curious because I was curious how she would respond to this information. I said, I used to be like that, minus the alcohol, because I didn't need alcohol to be a jerk. And I know exactly how lonely that guy is and all the reasons why he's drinking to try and deal with his life right now, because I was there. And it's really sad to me. And so I try to not let that stuff bother me because I understand how he feels in a room full of people but feeling totally alone. And she just like looked at me like, what did you just tell me? And I just waited. I was curious how she was going to respond, so I just waited. Like, how are you going to respond to that? That's a really pretty personal detail about my life. I used to be a huge jerk. I really struggled in social situations. I did not understand how to attract healthy attention, so I acted out and attracted unhealthy attention. That's what a bully is, right? That's what I was. And I didn't understand. So now I see a guy who's my age now, and he's still struggling with that fight. I feel for that because I was there. My life went a different path because people invested in me, but that could be me today still. So I shared those really intimate and kind of vulnerable, high-risk details about my life because I was curious what she'd do with that. And she went, I have a hard time seeing that. You don't seem like that now. What changed? Like, when did that happen? I was like, another decision point. I could say, I grew up. And like, that's an answer she'd totally accept. I could totally back off all this personal sharing stuff. this high risk stuff, I could get out. I've gotten out right now, ready to go. And I remember, because this one was a lot more recent. That last one was years and years ago. This one was a lot more recent. That thought crossed my mind. I could get out right now. But instead, I became curious how she would respond to this. I said, well, I gave my life to Jesus Christ, and I changed a lot of the bad stuff about myself because I thought that that's what God wanted me to do. And you'll never guess what happened. Right? Hostility, rage. Oh, Jesus is stupid. You're dumb. Everyone's dumb. No, like she went, oh man, interesting. I've been really wrestling with my faith. I have this Baptist background, but I've been really struggling with this other stuff. And like conversation started. I'm like, whoa, like, yeah. And I wish I could tell you I was surprised by that, except that at this point, I'm not surprised by that anymore because I do this all the time. And not because I'm special, but because like it's not actually that hard. You just be really curious about them, and you start sharing stuff with them, they start sharing stuff with you, and then they open up. And then you have a chance to have this whole conversation. So we talked about some things, and I offered some perspective. I tried to offer a lot of encouragement in that particular case, but then, I just was like, we should talk about this more. And she's like, yeah, and we had this great conversation. It's really cool It was really easy to get in. Because I just was really curious, I'm really curious how's she going to respond to this. Because when I'm insecure, I'm really worried that she's going to go, oh, he's one of those. When I'm insecure, I'm really worried that she's going to go, you don't have the right to tell me that. When I'm insecure, I'm worried that she's going to react in some way that is not real normal. That's not a real average way for a person to respond. When you think about your life as you're just kind of out in the world, the noteworthy, surprising experiences are experiences where people go out of their way to be a jerk. And it's so weird that we tell all our friends about it, and then we all lament how the world is such a crazy place, right? But like, in general, people can just have interactions and talk about stuff, like what's your favorite grocery store, right? So I have no insecurity about cereal. I know that Cinnamon Toast Crunch is the best cereal. I'm not insecure about that at all. Right, so you start trying to sell me on Cocoa Puffs. I'm like, no, sir. I know what's the best. And if I want to stay full, Cinnamon Toast Crunch is the best tasting cereal. But if I want the best cereal, if I want to stay full, it's Frosted Mini Wheats. And you can fight me on that if you want, but you're wrong. And I can tell you all about it, right? Like I'm not worried about you reacting about my cereal preference. Even if you make fun of me for it, I'm still just like, it's my cereal. I love it. You can not like it, that's okay, but I love it. It's my cereal. And somehow, like as soon as Jesus gets involved, we're like, every social protocol out there is just gonna get broken, and they're gonna like slap me, or they're gonna stab me, or whatever crazy scenario our mind can concoct, and we're like, everyone's just gonna forget how to human, and I'm gonna get lynched. It's like, no, like when you like different things normally, they might make a joke at your expense. Sometimes like I pursue this curiosity stuff to its logical ends, and people will say things to me that are actually kind of hurtful, like, well, I don't have enough money to be a Christian. It's really expensive because you're always, the church just wants your money and they're just giving, all your money and stuff. And I'm like, oh, that kind of hurts me because now you're telling me that that's what my life is built on as a person whose income is supported by the church. I'm like, you just told me that, well, that's a bummer. But I'm not real insecure about that because I know that some people think that way, right? It's just kind of a occupational hazard. But the more curious I become, the more I find out what people really think about it. So now my curiosity with that person has led me to an understanding the reason they don't like the church is because they think the church is dishonest. So now I'm curious, how do you reconcile my experience with the church? I have had the exact opposite experience with the church. I don't feel like the church wants my money. I feel like the church is more interested in these things. And now, I'm curious, what are you going to do about that? Because you've got this whole idea constructed about what church people are like, and now you've met one. I'm kind of curious how you're going to respond to one, because here I am, hi. I'm not stealing from the church. I know you're all relieved to discover that information. I'm just curious. I just want to know. Curiosity is by nature outward, right? It's about learning something or knowing something that you don't. Discovering something, right? It's out there. You got to go and find it. Which sounds a little bit like our commission. Right? We go and we make disciples. When people are asking us response questions to our curious pursuits, the anxiety goes away a lot. Can you imagine? Okay, so you show up to work tomorrow. Yeah, Mondays are, it's St. Patrick's Day? I don't know. You probably work on St. Patrick's Day. You show up to work sometime this week, and like your next door cubicle person just rolls their wheelie chair over to you, and they're like, I know that you're a Christian. Can you tell me all about your faith? Would you take me to your church on Sunday? I really want to know about this stuff. Like, that would not be a difficult thing to respond to, really, for most of you, right? That you'd be on the spot kind of like, wow, this is really breaking social protocols. Nobody's ever done this before. And they probably won't do that. But that's my point. You can get people asking you about your faith by asking them about their life and then just sharing ways that your faith deals with situations that they're experiencing. Can you imagine how much easier going and making disciples of all nations would be if everyone in the world was just asking you about your faith? You can create that because you just be curious and have a conversation, just like you would about a grocery store. They put in a Costco and you're a Sam's Club member and you want to know which one's better. You go ask somebody, like, tell me about Costco. Are you a Costco person? And they get done telling you about Costco and you go, I'm going to stick with Sam's because Sam's has all these things. Right? Sharing your faith is really that simple. At the end of the day, it's like you're just sharing a choice that you've made with people that you're interested in and curious about. They have problems in their life that are very similar to problems you have in your life. You've chosen to deal with them by submitting to Jesus as your Lord. You can just tell them about that the same way that you tell them, I prefer Sam's Club to Costco, or vice versa. It's just like that. But we overcomplicate it because we get wrapped up in this insecurity of how am I going to look? Am I going to perpetuate those negative stereotypes? Am I going to torch this relationship? Is this person going to be uncomfortable around me? I'll tell you from my experience, as like the preacher guy out there playing volleyball with people, the more comfortable and secure I am about my role as the preacher guy, the more willing to engage me this group is. That was a weird sentence. They are more willing to engage me the more security and comfort I demonstrate about my own position. They make jokes at my expense about working 1 day a week and about how like my job is just talking, and like they make a lot of jokes about me. You know, when you get in the volleyball huddle and everyone puts in their hands and they go 1, 2, 3, team cheer. You know what the most common thing is? 1, 2, 3, beer. 1, 2, 3, vodka. Like and when I'm around and they find out I'm a pastor, they're like 1, 2, 3, milk, right? Like. And everybody laughs because, like, I'm comfortable. It's fine. Yeah, totally. Right? You can totally make fun of me about my preference of shoes. I have super wide feet, so I buy weird shoes. You can make fun of me about, like, my clothing. I wear flannel shirts, and a lot of people think that's dumb. Right? You can make fun of me about my faith, too. I'm just as secure in my faith as I am in my clothing choices. Sure. Yeah. I'm one of those guys that gets up on Sunday morning and goes to church every Sunday. Isn't that funny? It's funny that I would do that, right? Like, because there's nothing at stake for me here. Sure, yeah. You think that's funny? Cool. I think it's literally the key to the universe. I'll tell you all about it if you want to know. Right? But like our worst case scenario fears, I just don't think are really real. I don't think that those things actually happen that often. When they do, you come talk to us. You come talk to your church, right? Share it with your family. We'll try and encourage you because sometimes people are mean and cruel. That'll happen. But not very much. Surprisingly. Very little. I have yet to have somebody respond when they find out I'm a preacher with this new volleyball group that I've been spending a lot of time with. When they find out I'm a preacher, like nobody is like, oh, get out of here. Like that's never happened to me. And preacher has a lot more stigma associated with it than just Christian. It's going to be all right. All right. I had a lot to say about that. I would ask you to forgive me, but I'm very glad with how all that turned out. So don't forgive me. Just do it. Okay. I'm talking about a lifestyle change. I'm talking about a lifestyle change where you're not so concerned with looking silly or doing the wrong thing or embarrassing yourself. I'm talking about a lifestyle change where like you're just interested. You're interested in the world. You're interested in people. You want to know what they're like, what makes them tick. You want to know how you're similar. You want to know how you're different so you can learn from them. Just be curious as a lifestyle change. And this go and make disciples of all nations thing will come so much more naturally and it will be so much more attainable. So let's pray for that. God, you have given us marching orders. I don't want to ignore them. I want my life to be about fulfilling your purposes. I want you to be the center of everything that I do. I struggle with insecurity still, even though I've tried to paint a positive picture of myself today. Everyone here struggles with that same insecurity that's universal to the human experience, as you know well. I am asking for special intervention that you would help us overcome our insecurity as a church, as individuals. That we would go confidently and boldly and curiously and try and make disciples, because that's the most important thing for us to do. I pray that you give us the words to say as you've promised, that you would give us the support that we need, and that we would always remember that truth, that Jesus is with us even to the very end of the age. God, we love you. We're proud to serve you. Give us the tools. Pray all of this in Jesus' name. Amen.